All right, so yeah, so I did present at EduFest, but if you did happen to be in the audience for that particular talk, don't worry too much. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't cover and a lot of data and ramifications of the data that I actually did cover. So pretty much 90% of what you're going to hear right now is going to be new, so it's going to be fresh. The other thing I want to point out is I come from a very different perspective from a lot of you guys. I'm not an EF, right? So I'm not education focused. I come from a very heavy research background, but obviously I'm interested in education and have been joining these COPs and the EduFest. But coming from outside, I hear a lot of rhetoric about different strategies for student well-being and equity and so on. There's all evidence-based, right? But I'm a data guy, right? So I'm sitting in the audience waiting for the data to come up on the screen and see that evidence and also the details associated with those particular strategies. I mean, so from my perspective, this is why you're going to get hit with a whole bunch of data. It's just because that's where I come from. The other thing I find really intimidating joining your education folks, you've got so many acronyms and I have no idea what they are. So I've been a bit cheeky here and put a bunch of my own made up acronyms on the screen here. Look, there's a QR code that's up on the screen there. It will take you to my education landing page. Just ignore that opening blurb, and if you click on the 4 pillars, there's a whole bunch of information there. I've used that My Education page to talk about the different strategies that I've found that work and provide how-to videos and so on and so forth. So I'll put this QR code up again towards the end of the talk as well. I'm focused on practical solutions, right? I guess we all are, but I'm really kind of focused on applying stuff that I hear in workshops and seminars and so on. And I'm generally really emphasizing strategies that will support student learning. I mean, look, that acronym on the side there is what probably everyone in this forum is interested in as well, establishing equity, but that elusive student engagement challenge as well. So these are the things I'm going to talk about just now. The context of the data I'm going to present, it's all collected across multiple years from a third-year undergraduate biology course. It's run through, as Chris mentioned, the School of Biological, Earth and Environmental Sciences, or BEES. It's team taught, so it's not just me. It's 2 other wonderful educators, Rob Brooks and Lisa Swans, who are fantastic. It's a small to medium-sized course, about 40 to 70 students. At the moment, it's entirely online and asynchronous, but it hasn't always been, and it won't always be, if that makes sense. And we'll get into that a little bit later in this presentation. But I do want to emphasize the fact that the strategies I'm going to be talking about today, there's going to be quite a few that are going to be generic. So it doesn't really matter whether you're online teaching or face-to-face. Some of these should actually be useful for you as well. A couple of these signpost slides will come up. This is mostly for my benefit, but I do want to take the opportunity here to explain that parenthetical as a kind of additional incentive for applying some of these strategies. I'll sit in a workshop or somebody's talk and they'll talk about a strategy for a problem that I'm facing as well, and I'll implement it. But I often find that there are these unexpected benefits. Either it's a time saver or it makes things more efficient, or there's a bunch of things that really, are really anticipated benefits from applying these. So if you need extra reasons for applying something, beyond that, you'll be amazed. There are additional things that you wouldn't have thought of by trying different strategies. I mean, we should all be doing it just because it's the right thing to do. But if you want to be a bit selfish about it, some of these strategies will actually save you some time as well and help you really focus on, particular areas and not getting too distracted. All right, so one of the, I guess, the big challenges that many of us face is trying to identify those students that may need extra support. But before they need that extra support, or those at-risk students that might struggle, but before they start struggling. So I use a very simple pre-course questionnaire. It's simply put in Microsoft Forms. I use it to essentially convey some personal circumstances of me to my students, my circumstances as an educator. I'm a single parent, occasionally working from home, so they may want to see, primary children wandering around in the background. But then I use that to sort of, I've shared some information, tell me something about yourselves, and really basic stuff like, what's your preferred name? What are you most excited about in the course? But I also slip in questions relating to, is there anything that you're particularly anxious about, or you're worried about, or something that you feel I should know as your course coordinator? And this is a questionnaire where they can convey that information before the course starts. I released that questionnaire about 2 weeks before the course starts, and that kind of tragedy of the over-surveyed commons thing, I actually thought, well, you'd be lucky to maybe get 10 students, maybe a third of the class would actually do it. It's entirely voluntary, has to be voluntary because they are self-reporting stuff. Each one of those questions are not hurdle tasks for then, releasing the course content or anything. But even still, in any given year, it's hovering between about 80 to 95% response rates. And so this is before the course has even started, right? So it's really, the students really engage with it. So here are some data about what is responding. So this is across a couple of years here. So is there anything about the course that you're feeling a bit anxious about? Now, I think the top two here, so look, 58% of students are identifying something that they're worried about in this particular course. The top two, perhaps no surprise, given the tri-semester system that we're facing here on the Randwick campus. Workload's a big deal. They're worried about workload. They're worried about time management. That third one, which is assessment, again, that's kind of understandable. A lot of students are worried about assessments, have a bit of anxiety associated with them. A couple of interesting ones. A reasonable proportion of students, 5%, are worried about engaging with their peers, which I thought was quite interesting. Some of those students are worried about the online format for the course, probably because they've had some really, unpleasant experiences on online teaching in the past, perhaps. Background knowledge is another one. So again, it's a third-year biology course, but we do occasionally have students coming from outside the Faculty of Science, so medicine, business, and humanities and the arts. And so there is that kind of an anxiety that perhaps because they're not coming from a biology background, they're going to struggle. We've designed the course to be standalone. I mean, it's still a third-year course, right? So there is expectations for that advanced level. But we try and teach with the acknowledgement that, students are coming with very diverse knowledge backgrounds as well. What might impact your progress? Is there anything that you want to convey to me that you might be concerned about? 14% of them are identifying external pressures, so outside work. Look, they've got to pay the rent, I suppose. If you've been keeping track of the Chronicle of Higher Education, you would have seen, reporting of the annual surveys that come out of the US that basically seeing what students are up to. And from one year to the next, it's increasingly more external pressures, in particular external work, but also social engagements. I mean, they've got to go out and socialize, right? Otherwise they go crazy. So they're becoming very time poor. So that kind of feeds into that workload and time management thing, I suppose. Reasonable proportion of students are identifying as having care responsibilities, not just having their own children, but they're looking after elderly parents or elderly grandparents, and they're the primary point person. And those things are hard to predict. Things will happen unexpectedly where you've just got to break away and deal with family things. So a few students are a bit worried about that. So 8% is something intrinsic to the students, something about their health primarily. Mental health pops up relatively frequently, so 5%. It doesn't sound like a lot, but in a course that's averaging about 50 students, that's a reasonable number of students to be aware of. Neurodiversity, so attention deficit disorder, those sorts of things, and physical health. Anybody who's had a back problem will know how deliberating having sport injury can be, especially if it's to do with your back, but even just spraining your wrist if you're playing basketball can, really impact your day-to-day capacity to engage with a computer or even just get onto campus in some situations. So if you use something like Microsoft Microsoft Forms. You can embed it in Moodle. You can download it as a spreadsheet, and it gives you a wonderful capacity to identify some of those students that might need a little extra support. And you can just, keep a closer eye on those particular students. So you can track their progress. But if you're going to get students to self-report stuff like this, you kind of need to action it. And one of the key ways of actioning it is just I send a individual email to every student who's responded to the survey, thanking them for doing, the questionnaire. And if they've not, identified any concerns, then, I welcome to them the course, and it's wonderful to have you. But for those students who have identified things that they're worried about, I will actually use that email to convey additional information to try and allay any fears that they may have. They're worried about engaging with their peers. I'll describe the context of what that might be in the course of the course, and the fact that it's actually turns out to be the most popular aspect of the course. And, look, just hang in there. I think you might actually find that it's not as fearful as you might think it is. So regardless of whether you use the questionnaire, the other strategy is we've got a few low stakes assessments and deadlines very early in the course, and any students that miss that, I will send them a informal email just saying, look, I noticed that you missed X. Is there anything I can help with? Is there any additional information you need that, will make you be able to meet that deadline in the next iteration? Students will almost always respond to that email, and within 24 hours. Usually it's that time management thing. You've had a few things going on that week and something had to slip, and it was that particular deadline. And then very strategic about where they put their time. So they will evaluate where to put their time depending on, is there an assessment, how many marks associated with things like that. But it demonstrates for students that somebody is monitoring their progress. It sounds a bit sinister, but they view it as somebody caring about their progress. And the really interesting psychology behind this is that they then start to try and work harder at meeting those deadlines and actually applying themselves and reaching their full capacity, not so much for their own benefit, because rather than not to let you down. So it's kind of really, really interesting psychology behind this. Look, really basic strategy, right? Pre-course surveys. I have various kind of other post-course surveys which are related to other stuff, plus my experience. And I'm really find it quite striking how often unsolicited comments in these avenues are saying how much they appreciated that somebody took the time to ask them, something about their personal context. So on one hand, I've put this quote up on the screen here. It's gratifying because it means it's working and the students certainly appreciate it. But then if you think, spend a bit of time reflecting on it, it's a bit troubling because often students will say, as the student has, that, this is the first time that, an educator's actually reached out and bothered to ask. And I really wish I'd had that during my degree because I think it would have been important. So, on that hand, it's such a simple thing. I mean, it's not rocket science. I'm just a bit disappointed that more of us are not doing this. So, look, it can save you some time. You can track students, give support. So for your own benefit, it's a really wonderful exercise, but from the students' perspective, they really appreciate it as well. This whole thing of, establishing equity is a challenge, right? I mean, equity can be defined in so many different ways. So I'm going to take it from the perspective of cultural background. And in particular, one of the questions in this pre-course questionnaire relates to, is English your first language? And if it isn't, what is? A third of the students in any given year will report saying that English is not their first language. So why is this something we should be aware of? Look, I know UNSW has hurdles for like English speaking comprehension or whatever the hell it is for students to be enrolling in degrees at UNSW, but sure, but at the end of the day, if English is not your first language, you're going to be at a disadvantage to a lesser or a degraded degree, depending on your fluency, compared to a student who has English as their first language and you're teaching in English. right? So that's just a given. So is there anything we can do to sort of accommodate those students coming from that background? I was able to get a student experience grant from the Faculty of Science, which is very generous, and it allowed us to actually provide some options, English caption options, highly accurate captions, and also some subtitling. We focused on simplified Chinese and traditional Chinese because out of that third, the greater proportion of those students were coming from a Chinese background, so it made sense in this pilot to focus on those particular languages. And so students had the option; they could just pick, regular viewing or one with English captions, so on and so forth. So again, want to remind you that a third of the class are identifying as English is not their first language. Over half the class are using the English caption option. So it's not only addressing potential cultural language barriers, but also other students are using it as well. So this is the unexpected benefits. So, I have a text box in the survey. This is post-course survey stuff that I do myself, and I'll ask them, so why did you use English captions? And it's improved comprehension. They're hearing the lecturer speaking the content and they're reading it at the same time. It's that reinforcement, having two different avenues of information being conveyed to you. Improves focus because obviously they're also reading it, so they're not getting distracted by looking at the birds out the window or whatever it is. Viewing context. Now, a lot of students are actually accessing lectures. If they're pre-recorded, they're actually accessing them on the bus or on the train, in a cafe, in the library. And even if they're using headphones, audio is probably not appropriate. So they're preferring to actually use the English captions rather than listening to it via audio. The thing I focused on in particular, based on those students that had identified as not having English as their first language, they were often using the captions to identify new words and how to spell those new words. And they would be attempting to look them up to try and figure out what they mean. But if you step back from that, every course and every topic has its jargon, has its concepts that perhaps are not these sorts of things that you can look up in a dictionary, an English language dictionary, certainly, but let alone another foreign language dictionary. So the advantage of having captions for you as an educator is you get the transcript and you can just quickly scan down and find those bits of jargon or those large words or those unusual words that you can then pull out very easily and write a glossary. Now, this is, I started doing this because I really wanted to see if this actually worked, and I didn't think it would be used very heavily at all. I figured maybe 5 or 6 students perhaps might use it. I started doing it, realized how much work it was, and it was like, oh, I've started it now. You can't only do it for a couple of lectures. You got to do it for the majority of those. It looks a bit piecemeal. In the end, it worked out to be about 300 terms and a document, if you compile it at the end across the whole course, of 6,000 words. So it was, perhaps it went a little over the top. I don't know, but, did they use it? 3/4 of the class relied on the glossary heavily, either for an individual lecture or frequently throughout the entire course. So it was work, but it was work that paid off well. Obviously, they're using this to clarify unfamiliar terms, but it also helped them understand. It provided additional information in that reinforcement for improved comprehension. And for those things that they found particularly interesting, it gave them additional background information on an interesting topic. So these were kind of the consistent things that students were identifying. So it was really unexpected benefit, heavily used. This maximizing engagement thing. So we'll move. This is still in the equity space, really, to be honest. Doesn't matter whether we're talking face-to-face, doesn't matter whether we're talking COVID, post-COVID, pre-COVID. I remember giving lectures in a lecture hall for this course where only a third of the students were turning up, and I would be talking to colleagues and they'd be like amazed. That's awesome. You got a third of your students turning up. What are you doing? And I'm thinking, what are you doing? I mean, you're only getting like 5 students sitting in your lecture. So it's a daring thing. And I've seen it over the last 10, 15 years. It's a progressive decline. And The reason why is because students are becoming very strategic in their time because they've got a lot of time pressures. It's as simple as that. Look, if you're doing pre-recorded lectures, and you're sitting here talking for 50 minutes, and then you're uploading them into something like Echo 360. Echo 360, by the way, is the best analytics you're ever going to get. Forget H5P, don't believe the hype, or Moodle. Echo 360 is fantastic. I encourage you, if you've got your stuff in there, I encourage you to have a look at those analytics because they're fantastic and they're done in a very intuitive way as well. But you might be in for a shock. I certainly was in for a shock. At the start of the course, you're going to be lucky if 2/3 of your students are actually watching your lectures in full. By the end of the course, this is the last 25%, last couple of weeks of the course, less than half are watching your lectures in full, right? Most of them are just skimming through. They're certainly listening to you at times 2 speed, whatever. I saw this data and I was shocked. You kind of think, oh, look, I'm pretty good. People seem to be interested. And then you look at this and you go, oh my God, am I that boring? Or is the topic that boring? I mean, what can you do? It's a personality thing. I've got this monotone. Maybe that's that. It is what it is. But I can tell you, if you look at your own data and you see this, it's not you and it's not your topic. And the reason why I can say this with confidence is because the My Experience scores for this course are really high. They're in the 5.7 out of 6, 5.8. Consistently, students are strongly in agreement they love the course. So it's not the educators, it's not the content, it's the delivery mode, right? Now, if you're giving face-to-face lectures and you see a drop-off in attendance, one of the ways, or engagement, the old school way of doing it is ditch that 50-minute lecture and start engaging with your students and doing those active learning strategies, wandering around the lecture theatre, asking questions, engaging, getting students to talk amongst themselves, all that sort of stuff, right? You can do that face-to-face. What can you do with pre-recorded lectures, right? I mean, surely this is the only format that we've actually got. You can actually create with the same content an interactive lecture and you will get your engagement. 100% of your students are going to watch your lectures in full and for the entire course. There's a bit of a dip down towards the end there, but that's the last week, so fair enough. But engagement's through the roof. Everyone's watching it and everyone's watching it through to the end. So what is an interactive video lecture? We bit the bullet. We used the same content. We went down into the PVC ESE studios. There are some issues associated with that, but we decided that this was the way to go. And we split our stuff up into smaller bits, married it with H5P to create these interactive lectures. The first one is this lecture sandwich type of format. It's relatively straightforward. So hopefully this video will play for a bit. It's stalled before, but basically you have a minute or two of concept, and then you have an H5P activity that the student then engages with. Could be a quiz, could be a drag and drop, which is what I've got up on the screen here. And the idea is, again, it's the exact same content, but now you're reinforcing it through an interactive activity. It's really quite straightforward. It's not rocket science, right? The other way is this, it's a little bit more complicated, this choose your own adventure sort of thing. Depending on your generation, if you're my generation, you might remember the choose your own adventure books. This is the very first one, Cave of Time. It was awesome. If you don't know what it is, basically you're the central character. You read for 10, 15 pages, you get into the Cave of Time, and then it says, do you want to take the left-hand tunnel or do you want to take the right-hand tunnel? And then if you take the left one, you go to page 25 and you read on, and you have all these decisions throughout the book. And by the end of it, you get eaten by a dinosaur or something like that. But you can do something similar with this lecture. You essentially allow the students to see the sequence of those topics in the order that they want. It works really well, though, if you can actually create your lecture, same content, but now as a problem-solving exercise. So this is an example on the screen here of animal navigation, and I'm using ants, and it's like, how do animals navigate? You've got to find direction, you've got to find distance from home. How do you think they're doing it? Are they doing it this way or are they doing it that way? And the students will then click on what they think is the right answer, and then we'll either clarify why it is the right answer, because students often intuitively think they know, but they don't quite know why it's the right answer, or if it's the wrong answer, why it's the wrong answer. And then they have the option to explore the alternative answer, and you move through the lecture using that kind of a format. It's really effective. Sounds like a gimmick, but if you think about it and do it properly, it's actually a really useful tool. If you ask the students which they preferred, we did have a couple of traditional 50-minute lectures still in the course. The majority of them really liked the lecture sandwich option. The second was the choose your own adventure. And when you drill down to the data, it turns out that everybody really likes the interactive thing. And the reason that some students are a bit intimidated by the choose your own adventure, because you're forcing them to have to think and make decisions and come up with answers. And, you know, it's in some students are a little intimidated by that. Once they've done this lecture once, they understand what it's about. So we can actually have some solutions here with a bit more transparency before they watch that first lecture to sort of, you know, shepherd them in so that they're not as anxious, perhaps. You will have students say, look, you know, it was more about who the educator was. Lisa was awesome, but Terry was so boring, or Rob was fantastic at explaining stuff, or, you know, personality comes into it, and it's just inevitable. And some people gel more with one educator than the other. There was a slim proportion of students that preferred the 50-minute lecture. And so I was really interested in these students, and I looked at their responses and found out they're mature age students and they're master's students, or they're taking some coursework to make up credit units for a postgraduate degree. They're my generation. They're used to sitting in a lecture hall, listening to a 50-minute lecture, and this whole newfangled thing of, you know, activities and stuff like that. They wanted basically a podcast that they could have in the background as they were making dinner, for example. So generational thing, perhaps. Why did they, you know, when they prefer the interactive one, why did they prefer interactive? It's because it's more engaging, which is reassuring because that's how we designed it. Unexpected benefits, improved focus, right? Because they're having to think. It's like the subtitles, they're having to think about doing stuff, and they, you know, have to follow the content a little bit better. It improves comprehension. Better flexibility, another unexpected thing, because they can stop, you know, at different points during the lecture and take a break and come back, and the lecture will just start at the last point they were at. So, you know, additional benefits here. And key benefit, 100% engagement. It's awesome. It does actually work. Bit of effort though. All right, so I just want to touch on evolving student needs. This comes from a discussion that we had in this COP a couple of weeks ago. First of all, so this is my experience data on, you know, do the students feel the course was inclusive? Apparently UNSW didn't care about inclusive teaching before 2019. I'm not sure what that's about. Plus, I can't actually get benchmarking on university-wide data here. I can for the faculty in science in my course, obviously, but not for the university. Again, I don't know what that's about. But when I introduced those kind of pre-course questionnaires, the captions and the glossaries, that kind of sense of inclusion for students really did increase. 5.7 basically means the vast proportion of students strongly agree that the course was inclusive. So it is working. This is what I wanted to demonstrate, to get back to that discussion we had a couple of weeks ago. This is the sense of belonging to a learning community. We originally had the course as in-theatre lectures and practicals in a teaching lab, and the sense of community, learning community. Honestly, I don't, you know, we're not EFs, right? So I'm not even sure I knew what a learning community was, to be honest, as an educator, and I'm not sure the students perhaps did or not. But you know, we were doing okay, shall we say, compared to everyone else. And then we went asynchronous online. This wasn't really a COVID response. This was something that we were intending to do because the course clearly needed to be revised. And that sense of learning community, it's asynchronous and online, but you know, it was really tracking well. And this is what's been happening the last couple of years. So originally it was all about flexibility, more online options. Again, if you're keeping track of the Chronicle, all these surveys coming out of the States saying students want to have flexibility. Way to do that is having more online options. But now I'm getting unsolicited responses in my experience, you know, ranging from about a quarter to a third of the students unsolicited saying we love the course, but it would be lovely if we could have face-to-face pracs. And it gets to that point that Chris was trying to make a couple of weeks ago of, the architecture of the learning environment, just having a space where students can come together, interact with each other, have that support system, make friends, really basic stuff, right? They seem to be really wanting that. But then you kind of more flexibility, more online options, more face-to-face. How do you reconcile those two things? The obvious one is to go hybrid. And I want to preface this with what I'm going to show next by I know many of you are fantastic hybrid teachers because you care about it. You know how to use the technology and you're invested in doing it properly. I've sat in workshops where I've been in person or online, and it's been fantastic because the educator knows what they're doing and they cared. But I've also been sitting in workshops, both sides, where it's actually been like this on the screen. The typical experience is that the online people are stuck on that computer at the front of the screen. The educator is so focused on the complexity of teaching to the people who are there in the room, you get forgotten. At best, you'll have somebody perhaps monitoring the chat who will just pipe up every now and then if somebody has a question, but that's basically it. There are issues with equity as well. There are reasons why students are not in that room. Some of it's well-being issues, mental health issues, anxiety. Some of it's practical stuff. There's care responsibilities, they've got work. It's that flexibility sort of things. And now if that online experience for hybrid students is poorer, that's a big issue. So we're going to try something different next year. So this is a wait and see sort of thing. We're going to do this dual stream tailored experience. What on earth is this? This is basically we're keeping the course as it is, fully online, asynchronous, but we're also using a companion course. It's exactly the same content. It's exactly the same online asynchronous, except we have the practicals in a teaching lab and it's face-to-face. And the idea here is to tailor that learning experience to what the students actually want. If you're sitting here going, that's great, but hybrid's better because it's not more, you're doubling the work for yourself here. What are you thinking, Terry? The reality is the way we're going to design it. I'd love to speak about it in the future, about how successful it is. Other than me physically having to go downstairs and walk into the teaching lab and interact with students for a couple of hours, which I made a point last week, I really love and I miss, and it's a mental health thing for me as well. That's the only additional work. The rest of it should all be basically as it is. So you're just splitting your student cohort up into two, but it's essentially the same amount of work. Anyway, that's the argument, and we'll see whether it actually pans out. There's the QR code again. You'll get to that landing page of my education. Just ignore the opening blurb and just go to the different pillars if you want tips, how-to videos, so on and so forth. In terms of what I've talked about today, what was meh? The foreign language subtitles. The students really appreciate it, even if they're not coming from a non-English speaking background. Students will go, look, I really appreciate the fact that the educators tried to do this. No one used it, so very expensive, probably not worth doing. Pre-course questionnaire, super easy, highly effective, saves you some time as well. English captions, relatively cheap. You can do it on the cheap. You can get Teams, you can get PowerPoint, you can get YouTube to create these captions for you. I will say one thing though, if you're trying to address cultural background in English or not being their first language, those captions have to be very accurate for that to actually work properly. We had a third-party company do it for us. It was relatively cheap, actually. You can actually get in there and edit it yourself, but it's going to take quite a bit of time. But it can be done, and it's heavily used. The glossaries, a lot of work, but wow, did they use it? And interactive lectures, some work. Look, the PVC, there are ed tech folks now in the PVC ESE and in the Faculty of Science. They know how to do those interactive lectures because we've worked with them to do it. So there are people there who can support you if you want to do something along those lines. And as I've always kind of end with all my talks, but forget all that other stuff. Just try one thing. One thing to start with is just being nice to your students. It sounds very Mickey Mousey, but what's going to happen is the students will become more invested in your course. they'll be more engaged. They won't want to let you down. Again, it's all about psychology. And it can be exhausting for you. You're answering the same question over and over again. It's in the course manual. Why don't you just look there, treat every interaction as the first time, and just be super accommodating if you can be, friendly and understanding, and guarantee you'll be amazed about the results. So forget all this other stuff. Just do that one thing and you'll be great. That's for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. So if you can all give your applause, because that was fantastic, and we can see a lot of digital applause and visual applause. That was amazing, Terry. Thank you so much. I got too many questions and we've got such little time. So instead, I saw a couple of hands. Chantel's got a hand up, so give Chantel the floor. Go for it, Chantel.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Chris. Terry, that was a fantastic talk and I really enjoyed it. One thing that sprang to mind was how does, for example, your pre-course questionnaire interact with ELS? So, for example, when you get the ELS provisions, are you, for example, cross-checking those who have said that they have anxiety to see whether they have an ELP? And would you raise that with them? Or how does what you're doing interact with broader university systems?
So it's informal. So it's purely off my own bat. If it, again, you'll find students that will, I mean, I've had students who have basically said, look, I've just come in a hospital because I've had a severe psychotic break and I'm on, I'm really worried about it. I'm just, all sorts of things. What will happen is that when I respond to send them an email, I will make sure that all that kind of well-being, all the links and the information and where it is, I will actually have that towards the end, but it's important not to be kind of like this automated response sort of stuff. And so it's definitely like, sorry to hear about all this sort of stuff. Look, you just make sure that the one thing that you need to do is just let me know as early as possible anytime that you have issues and we can try and figure stuff out. And, when those sorts of things do pop up during the course, I will then actually refer them to the, the mental health units and things like that. If it was in person, I would literally just walk them down there. So that's the context. So there's no official connection. I'm not going to alert anybody because this is all supposed to be private. The whole point is that they're telling me and no one else. So, I don't want to just refer, look, there's this student I'm really worried about and you need to do something about it. I let the student direct them on that. And look, it's tricky. It's really tricky. But I don't let that put you off, right? I don't want people to just go, well, this is not what we're trained for, right? But it's, there's only a proportion of students that you may encounter in that sort of context. The rest of the students, it's still really valuable. So don't be concerned about that at all, if that kind of answers your question. So, Gabby, I think you had your hand up next. Is that right?
Thanks, Terry. Yeah.
Thanks, Chantel.
Thank you for such a cool presentation. I wanted to ask a question about the glossaries. How did you decide what words or concepts to include in the glossaries? And did you use someone else to do the translations for you? Can you just speak a bit more about that process?
Yeah, look, it was literally me scanning through the list while I was on the plane flying out to the field. And it was mostly about, look, in the back of my mind, I was thinking of students that didn't have English as their first language. But then as I was doing it, I was pulling out, names of researchers that we might cover and giving them a little bio as well. So I was also thinking about students who might just be interested in a little bit more information about a topic. Mostly, look, it literally comes down to scanning through, looking for those jargons. You should know what the jargon is. For sexual selection, natural selection, I'd define it. Adaptation, I'd define it. Things that you just have to be a little bit aware of. What a lay person might struggle with, I guess, is kind of the bat. And then I read it all myself. Honestly, Wikipedia is pretty good. Not cut and paste job sort of stuff, but just to sort of help me, phrase what I wanted to say. When I gave this talk at EduFest, somebody suggested using ChatGPT and then editing the responses on that. I'm a bit nervous about that because ChatGPT seems to be, you know, crap, eloquent crap, shall we say? But yeah, look, it's not as, you know, formal as you might think. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, very easy, I think.
Awesome. Thank you.
Annika, just briefly, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I'll keep it very brief. Thank you very much, Terry. I really love the fact that your presentation just kind of just says it's not rocket science, just be kind, just do, you know, just care about your students. And that's definitely, I think, a great takeaway message for anything. I was just wondering, in your data-based mindset of looking at that, when you talked about workload being one of the concerns of students, you mentioned the thing that I've noticed comes up all the time since I've arrived at UNSW, that the trimester model is the cause of that. Do you actually have any data that suggests that that is the cause of the workload being a concern, or is it just that that's what is concerning students at university, no matter what the system?
I think, you know, look, the question's phrased in a way that they're just saying, look, I'm worried about workload. I'm worried about the different things that I've just looked at in the course manual. So they're thinking very locally in terms of your course. Look, we don't have an end of year exam anymore because we want to, and it's deliberately because we want to give students, so everything, as soon as the last day of classes, they've got the weekend, hand in the last assessment, and then hopefully they'll have a week and a half just to sort of decompress. That's the strategy we've decided to do, rather than have a stew back in exams and all that sort of stuff. But don't have any data on the tri-semester system. I can tell you there is data out there, and you know, the higher ups do have it, and people who are the directors of teaching and associate deans and stuff like that. Yeah, so because there's insight surveys and things like that that the students are actually talking about, and it has, having been on the executives, yeah, it's talked about, and there is data there. I don't have it. I'm not collecting it because I've got no control over it. So.
Yeah. No, that's fine. And probably it's irrelevant for me asking because I don't actually operate within the system anyway. So it's my workload issue is different. But yes, I was just intrigued by that as the side thing, whether if we're looking at what is actually driving that thing around workload, whether it's just the workload is a general thing rather than anything to do with trimesters.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like it's a little bit about trimesters, but I think it's a general thing as well. I think if we were just using our dual, you know, the old school 2-semester thing, they would be saying the same thing perhaps, because they'd be taking more courses, right? So now they're kind of like doing 2 or 3, but before they would be like doing 3 or 4.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Terry.
I'm sorry, Gavin. I'm going to cut you off because we've only got a couple of minutes to go, and I want to finalise. Maybe you could reach out to Terry or put in the chat and we can follow up. I'm going to add a whole heap of questions to the chat as well. If you can once again thank Terry. That was a wonderful presentation, really great discussion. And I'm really in awe of what you do, Terry, how you find all that time and patience and energy to be able to change everything. And persevere and be vulnerable in that teaching. So thank you once again for showing us that it can be done and being vulnerable.